Hey guys, it's Andrew Esquivel here, back with another tutorial, and today I'm going to show you how to make snail jello. Now, snail jello is a simple substance to make, provided you have the key ingredients and a little bit of patience. It sounds like a lot of work, but it's actually very much worth your time to do, because by the end of this tutorial, you will know how to make a very high calcium substance that your snails will definitely enjoy and help aid them during their growth period, when their shells desperately need calcium. So, let's go over the materials that I use. Now, there are a few basic things in snail jello that are very common. Now, every recipe is a little different. This is my preferred recipe. I gotta grab one more thing here. So, first off, you'll see that we have antacid. This may startle some people. But yes, this is one of the main ingredients in snail jello, and here's why. Look at the active ingredients. Calcium carbonate. These antacid are chock full of the calcium that they are going to need. Next, we need sort of a base material to start with, and you'll see why in a little bit, because it does involve cooking a little bit. And the most common choice is baby food. Either green beans or spinach, whichever one has the most calcium, because this is kind of like a liquidy substance almost, and this is what everything is essentially going to start to go into after we've done our preparation work. Now, adding variety is a good thing. I add a little bit of my shrimp pellets as well as algae wafers. This is from Hikari, this is from Wardley. And the last thing you're going to need, food-wise, is Knox gelatin. This is unflavored. Make sure to get the unflavored. You'll be using 1 to 1.5 boxes to make this snail jello recipe. So over here we have some pre-prep stuff, and this is what it looks like when you start to get it down to where it needs to be. And this is the tedious part. You have to grind it down into a powder. A lot of people have a lot of different methods of grinding it. Right now, I'm using one of these. It's kind of like the slap chop. Hi, I'm Vince with Slap Chop. I got a similar one at Walmart's, and it does okay. You can go about it in any way you see fit, but the key is to get everything into a powder. So we take 10 of these 750 milligram antacids, and yes, it can be the Equate Walmart generic brand. It doesn't have to be anything special. Just make sure the primary ingredient is calcium carbonate. And I also have in there right now just a handful of shrimp pellets, good bottom feeder food. And I am about to add my hikari algae wafers into the mix as well. That is the dry foods portion. Well, I'll show you what to do after you have all your dry foods chopped up and minced down into the finest powder that you can make it. So this is what it will look like when it's chopped up, and just for reference, these hikari algae wafers are extremely difficult to get into a powder. They are a very, very hard substance, so doing it by hand is really, really tedious, and even with this, I have managed to bend some of this metal. This is brand new, by the way. And it took at least maybe 7-10 minutes to get everything finely powdered enough to where we can use it. So this is what it looks like, and for reference sake, handful of Wardley shrimp pellets, 10 750 milligram antacid, and 10 hikari algae wafers. That will make up the dry food portion of your snail jello. Next, you will take your baby food, which looks like this, put it in a small non-stick pan, and kind of flatten it a bit, because one of the things we want to do is make sure that there are no air bubbles when we put the gelatin in with this, because if there are air bubbles in your mixture, the snail jello may not sink, which would defeat the purpose of making this entirely. So we flatten it out, and we're going to let it sit for about maybe 5-10 minutes, and then we're going to pour the dry food in mix it in with it, and then let it sit again and get more air bubbles out. And then we put the Knox Jello in. So let's let this do its thing for just a little bit. We got the dry food mixed in now on top. Now we gotta mix it to make it a single substance. Mixing dry food with the wet food. I'll show you what that looks like when I'm done. Okie doke. So this is when it's all mixed in, your dry portion with the wet portion, and as I said before, let it sit. You can see air bubbles are popping up. Let me get all that air out of there. And while we're letting it sit doing that, we take our Knox gelatin, which you can get very, very cheaply at Walmart. And you can use anywhere from 1 to 1.5 packs for this mix. I'm going to use 1.5 packs because that's what I used before. Using too little will not allow the structure to be as solid as you want it. Too much will probably make it too hard of a substance. So 1.5 is about the appropriate amount for this Snail Jello. This is what the Knox gelatin looks like when it's out. And I'm not seeing any more bubbles really popping up from here, so we're going to try and evenly spread this across. And now we really got to mix it in quick. Now don't worry too much if your result is a little bit clumpy. That's pretty typical. All we got to do now is turn the heat off, put it in a small Tupperware container, and let it sit in the freezer for about an hour. When you are done putting it in your container, try and make it as even and flat throughout as possible. I know it doesn't look like much, but this will last you quite some time. And now we're going to close it up. But the reason you want it kind of flat is because we are able to take this out after an hour in the freezer as a solid piece of gelatin style Snail Jello. And we'll cut it up into little squares, or cubes in this case, and then we could feed it to the snails. Set course for 1 hour. Alright, an hour has passed. Let's take a look at our Snail Jello. And this is what it looks like. It is a solid mass. All you gotta do, take a knife, cut around the edges, and it'll plop right out. And like I was saying, it is a solid substance. So now we can cut it up into little chunks and feed our mystery snails some super high calcium nom-noms. It is now chunkified. Let's go see how the snails react. Okay, we are at the snail tank, of which we have many baby snails. We have our adult snails. Let's add some Snail Jello and see if they like it. Now, one of the important things, as I was talking about, was making sure that it sinks. Let's see and make sure that it actually does. Bloop. Right to the bottom. Unfortunately next to a bunch of snail poop, but they will find their way around the poop. I clean the poop out every day. Since I have 3 sections, each section gets a Snail Jello and one for the babies. Help them grow nice and strong. Now you don't want to overdo Snail Jello because my tank is 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Tropical tanks, vary anywhere from 70 to 80 degrees is where generally people have theirs. 70 on the low end, 80 near the high end usually. The Snail Jello will decompose over a long period of time. So realistically, you only need to add 1 for maybe once a week, because this stuff is just jam-packed with calcium. Feed them their regular diet, and this is their calcium supplement. So doing it like that, you'll last a long time. And you don't have to make just a small amount at once. You can double the recipe or triple it, quadruple it, however you want it. And you can just keep it in the refrigerator for short-term use. Keep it in the refrigerator for no more than, I'd say, 1 to 1.5 weeks before it starts to go bad. But if you keep it in the freezer, it'll last a very long time. So I would say if you got your weekly feeding coming up, take one or a few out of the freezer, put it in the refrigerator to defrost overnight or over the day, however you want to do it. And when it comes time for feeding, just plop it on in there, and a pre-defrosted snail jello will be much easier to eat and detect by the mystery snails. So keep that in mind. Now we just kind of have to wait because they are snails, and as we know, snails are kind of slow-moving creatures. So let's give them a little bit to find the snail jello and see how they eat. Here we have one of my golden mysteries who have just noticed the snail jello. And if you have a warmer tank like mine at 80 degrees Fahrenheit, the snail jello will thaw out faster. It'll still remain solid for many hours. But once it starts to thaw out, they can start eating it easier and start smelling it faster. And they will just chomp on that, and eventually what's going to happen is all the snails are going to pile on top of it and try and get a piece of it because it has all the tasty nom-noms. Oop. Pulled a reverse James Bond on me here. Mystery snails. They're so funny. Looks like another one of my mysteries may have just noticed the snail jello as well. So they'll take their time at it. It'll take them a while to eat all of it. It is quite a bit of food for them. And they were recently fed. I gave them some algae wafers earlier in the day. But yeah, that's how you make snail jello, guys.